join us for a highly anticipated new series, Heroines of Islam, hosted by Laila Nasheeba. Allow her to take you through time exploring the lives of these powerful, courageous, spiritual pillars of Islam. Learning about their lives through a lens, unique and explained through a woman's point of view using authentic hadith. Tune in every Monday and Wednesday 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. Right here on Sunnahfollowers. She was considered to be one of the most controversial yet influential figures in the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. The mother to the believers. The devout, courageous, strong-willed woman would become a leader, scholar who would shape the Islamic faith. Her name is Aisha Bint Abu Bakr. Join host Laila Nasheeba Monday and Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central for this extraordinary series. Heroines of Islam here on Sunnahfollowers.
Guys, in alhamdulillah wa salat wa salam ala wa rasulallah. Today we're going to speak about Aisha and how she was one of the first scholars of Islam. We're going to speak about how she was someone who surpassed many others in her knowledge that the companions would not even embark upon anything without consulting her. And this is another one of the characteristics that distinguished her from among the other wives of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, her vast knowledge in the field of Islam, okay? She was a scholar who was often referred to in many different fields because of her intelligence and because of her competence. In fact, she used to sit in many knowledge circles, both before and after her marriage to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, they talk about Aisha getting married at the age of, becoming a wife at the age of 9. You know, she was mature. Even before her marriage to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she was an expert in knowledge of poetry and genealogy and all of that stuff. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is speak about these 3 points and examine her place in the world of Islamic knowledge. First of all, and by the way, the pictures used today, I didn't pick them. The program that I'm using picked these crazy pictures. So don't jump on me about the pictures today. Okay, Aisha was a very smart woman. She possessed a sharp wit and she had very deep thoughts. And we can tell this from the questions that she used to ask the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, during his life, as well as from the position that she held in the events that took place after his death. We have to remember, we talked about how she came from good stock. She was raised by 2 people who were very distinguished, Abu Bakr, and Ruman. I'm going to do the story of Ruman, radiyallahu anhu, who was her mother. And my cousin Mukhtar is doing the story of Abu Bakr with you guys now. Her father, Abu Bakr, was a very close friend to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and was very well acquainted with poetry, literature, history, and the culture of the pre-Islamic period. And her father was also very good in accounting. And of course, Aisha inherited these things from her father. And because of her father's involvement in business, he was a good judge of character. He had insight. And this is something that a lot of people lack today. He was able to look at a person and determine if that person was good or not. Okay, Aisha had that ability too. Also, her father, Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, he had transferred these qualities to his children. Remember, we talked about how the tribe that Abu Bakr came from, they weren't as oppressive against women as the other Arabs were. We talked about how Abu Bakr's tribe, they didn't bury their daughters. They didn't look at the daughter, a girl child, as being a curse per se. Okay. So he spoiled his girls. In fact, he spoiled Aisha. We talked about how Aisha was spoiled by both her father and her mother. So her father, you know, subhanAllah, he shared his knowledge of poetry, literature, history, and all of that with his children, including his daughters. And also,
in the Zoom room.
What? Well, I'm sorry. For those of you that can't see in Zoom, only thing I can ask y'all to do is join YouTube, because for some reason the program is only, and I don't want to lose my YouTubers. Y'all can double up. Okay. In addition to these qualities, Abu Bakr and his wife were among the fortunate people who were first to believe in the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we talked about that. Abu Bakr is the second man. They say first, but he's really the second man to take Shahada. The first was Waraka, who was the cousin of Khadija. He was the one that let the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam know that he was a prophet. And he converted to Islam first. But Abu Bakr was the second male to embrace Islam. Okay. And her mother was one of the first of the women too. So thus Aisha, she came from a world that was very cultured in knowledge, cultured in history, and cultured in faith. Remember, the Arabs did believe in Allah. They believed in Allah. But they did not believe that Allah was the only one worthy of worship. That's the difference. That's the problem. Okay? They used to worship other idols in addition to Allah. Abu Bakr wasn't like that. Abu Bakr never believed in anything being worshipped but Allah. So Aisha inherited this from her father, this faith. And she obtained a lot of information about poetry and literature from her father. And in fact, her marriage to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought her right to the source of knowledge about faith. Okay? I tell you guys all the time, Aisha radiallahu anha was not only a wife of the Prophet, but she was also his student. He knew that she was young. He knew that she had a mind that could absorb knowledge, and he played upon that. Okay? He played upon that. And Aisha, radiallahu anha, she never stopped asking questions. She was a very inquisitive woman. We talked about that. Her nature was, she had no fear. She had no censor when it came to her tongue. She had no problem expressing how she felt verbally. She had no problem asking questions. Okay? If she had a question, she would ask whatever came to her mind, and she would share whatever she learned with others, especially Muslim women. And I tell you guys, I personally, Laila Nasheeba, I consider myself, a person like Aisha in many ways. Aisha loved learning, and that's what I do. I love learning. Aisha had a photographic memory. I got a photographic memory. Aisha took everything she learned and shared with others, especially women, and that's what I do. There's a lot of men who learn from me, but my dawah was directed towards the Muslim women. And there was a lot of men that learned from Aisha too, but her dawah was directed towards the Muslim woman. So I shared that with her. Okay. And with this sharing, this is what made her a scholar whom people turn to in all matters, especially after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam died. The first four caliphs, her father, Umar, Ali, Uthman, they would come to her and ask her questions about the religion to make sure that they hadn't forgotten something. Even Abu Huraira, Ibn Abbas, and many other companions would turn to her to solve their problems. Why? Because again, she was the closest, most beloved person to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And particularly Umar radiallahu anhu. Umar in particularly, he held her above all others. And he referred all matters regarding women or family to the family life of the Prophet to her. And let me talk about this. Let me see if I can put this down for us. Well, no, I can't because I don't want to mess it up. Nowadays, we have a lot of male daya. There's a lot of men out there who speak about Islam. But how many of those brothers refer you to a woman? Let me use my website for an example. Sunnahfollowers, we've been around since 1986. Since 1986. A lot of these famous speakers they got their start here on my website. But then when they got famous, they left the website and forgot about me. They don't mention my website. They don't mention me, And all I've ever asked those brothers, all I've ever said is I will stream you and I will broadcast you. I will video you. All I ask is that you send your women to me. Send the women in your community to me to learn, because I can teach them better about women issues. None of those brothers listen to me except for Dr. Ibrahim Jamali. Dr. Ibrahim Jamali is the only one that ever referred the women, and he still to this day will tell the women, go to Layla, go ask Sister Layla. Nowadays, men don't want to accept corrections. Men don't want to admit that they don't know it all. And they don't, then rather than refer them to a sister like Layla, like me, they'll sit there and give you answers that are not correct. Or either they're watering down the religion. They don't want you to know the truth about your rights as a woman. Well, Aisha, radiallahu anha, was a lot like Laila Nasheeba. She didn't like to see the rights that Allah gave to women violated. Nowadays, we have this thing called women's lib, Muslim women out there trying to initiate some revival for the women. This is ignorance. Allah has already given us our rights as women. What are you trying to do? There's no women's lib here in Islam. Allah liberated us. Allah brought us women out the darkness and gave us rights. You sisters need to learn your rights and implement them. Make the men. A person can only do to you what you allow them to do. A person can only violate you and oppress you if you stand by and let it happen. Remember, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said one of the things that makes the Christians stand out over us is they don't allow their rulers to oppress them. They'll take them out. They'll assassinate them in a heartbeat. We Muslims sit there and let people oppress you rather than learn the truth about your deen from a woman. You will sit there and allow men to make you think that you have to be ugly, that you can't be beautiful, you can't wear a ponytail, you can't be tall. This is ignorance. And it's you sisters' fault for taking that crap. Because when you got a person like me trying to teach you the truth, and I'm using hadiths like this, you don't want to listen to me because you can't deal with your jealousy. Your jealousy gets in the way. Well, Aisha went through the same nonsense. She was constantly correcting the men, telling them, don't take away the rights that Allah gave us women. And because she was an authority on women's issues and family life, because she lived with the Prophet, Umar radiallahu anhu, he held her in the highest respect, the highest esteem. He only allowed, when he was the caliph, he only allowed her to speak on such issues. That's why a lot of those hadiths are narrated by her about women's menses and women's issues. In fact, Abu Huraira, Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar and them, they would say, go ask Aisha. When people would come, because they had schools too. When the women would come asking them questions, they would tell them, go ask Aisha. And because of this is how Aisha narrated over 2,000 hadiths. She was one of the top 7 companions who narrated the most hadiths because they gave her a respect, a respect she had as being a Muslim woman who was married to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This respect is hard to find as a female today. But you sisters, you don't go about it the way you are by imitating the Kafirs. You have to make men respect you. You have to stand up and demand your respect. As long as you sit there and let the men make you think that you have no rights, make the men think that you're nothing but a sex toy and a baby maker, then that's all you women will ever be. Aisha wouldn't allow it. I don't allow it. Now, also, guys, just let me share some inside information with you about Aisha that many of you probably have never heard of before. Aisha radiallahu anha, she tells us that the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to take the children into their homes during the month of Ramadan. How many of you knew that? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent most of his time during Ramadan at the masjid. But his wives, they would take the orphan children into their homes and they would enliven the children with religious exercises. During the month of Ramadan, the wives of the Prophet would teach the children the Quran. They would teach the children how to pray. They would teach the children the rules of fasting, the same way I do here with all of you during Ramadan. While the brothers during the month of Ramadan are taking a break, Layla's on the internet every day, streaming nonstop. I'm teaching you the rules of fasting, not in a workshop. You can't learn about fasting in no 2-3 day workshop. I spend the whole month of Ramadan taking you through how to fast day by day. That's how Aisha did, radiallahu anha. That's how the Prophet's wives did. They would take the orphans in and spend each day teaching them about Ramadan, about the Quran and all of that. Also, during the time of the Prophet, guys. Also during the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for the girls who were the age of puberty, for the young girls who were the age of puberty, Aisha and the wives of the Prophet would set up a tent, and that tent was called a hidr, and that tent would be set up in a corner of the Prophet's house. And when one of the girls completed her education and she was puberty, she would be placed inside that tent. And then the name of a man who wanted to marry her would be told to her. Y'all see this? They would go to her and say, oh, so-and-so, you are now the age of puberty. There's a brother, so-and-so wants to marry you. And if the girl wanted to marry the man, she would remain silent. That meant yes. But if the girl did not want to marry the man, she would hit the tent with her hand. How many of you knew this? How many of you knew this? This is during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For those girls who were orphans, when they reached the age of puberty, they would be set up in a corner of the Prophet's home in a tent. That way they would be by themselves. And if someone wanted to marry them, the Prophet would come and announce to them, brother so-and-so wants you. If she was quiet, yes. If she hit the tent, no, she didn't agree to that. And we have a hadith here, and you guys have heard this hadith, but now I'm giving you the story behind it. One day, Aisha, radiallahu anha, she took a girl under her protection who was an orphan from the Ansar. And she raised that girl. The girl was not puberty. She raised her as her own. This is when she was married to the Prophet. But when the girl became puberty, Aisha set a tent up in her house, and the girl would go into that tent, you know, to be alone, so she couldn't be around any non-mahrams. The Prophet wasn't her non-mahram. If he came to visit Aisha, the little girl would go in the tent. When the Prophet wasn't there to visit Aisha, the girl was outside the tent mixing with Aisha. Well, when one day, the girl was puberty, and the Prophet and Aisha, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had told Aisha that there was a man who wanted to marry her. So Aisha talked to the girl and said, "There's a brother that seeks your hand in marriage." The girl immediately went inside the tent. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam announced to the girl outside the tent, "So-and-so wants to marry you." The girl remained quiet. So that meant, yes, she agreed. So the Prophet smiled and left. And when he left out the house, the girl came out the tent and Aisha hugged her. And Aisha said, "We're going to prepare your wedding. We're going to prepare your wedding." This is the hadith where Aisha was doing her hair. This is Bukhari, Sahih Bukhari. Aisha loved to do hair. Aisha was preparing this young girl that stayed with her, that she helped raise for her wedding. And as Aisha was doing her hair, they were talking about the rest of the preparations. The wedding was a very plain wedding. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on the day of the wedding, he came and he said, "Aisha, this wedding is so plain. Do you have entertainment? Because the Ansar love entertainment." And Aisha said, "Yes." SubhanAllah, this is that hadith in Sahih Bukhari. Now you see the story behind it. This girl who Aisha was doing her hair, preparing her for her wedding, was one of the young orphan girls that lived with Aisha, that Aisha took in. And she spent her time learning the religion from Aisha. And when the Prophet came around, she would go inside her tent. That's the story. How many of the brothers tell us this? How many of the brothers tell you women this stuff? Okay. Also, these services that Aisha would do during the lifetime of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she also continued to do after his death. Aisha devoted herself to teaching Islam. She was a dawah. Wherever Aisha went, she turned wherever she was into a knowledge center, especially Medina. In the first 60 years after the migration, Aisha had a school. She was the one that turned Medina into an Islamic learning center. Many women would come and stay with her to learn the hadith. These women, whose numbers would vary between 40 and 70, used to stay in either Aisha's rooms, because remember, Aisha also, when Sauda died, Sauda gave her, willed her apartment to Aisha, and other people gave her property too. So when these people would come to learn, remember I told you guys, when Muawiyah was the caliph, declared himself the caliph of Syria, Muawiyah sent the women with their husbands to learn the religion to Medina, okay? Aisha would house those women, those Roman women who had converted to Islam, and she would teach them the deen. She would sometimes have 40 to 70 women, and they would either stay with her or in the chambers that were next to her or close to her. And this is how they look, little chambers next to each other. This college of Islamic instruction educated many esteemed female scholars. And I'm going to tell you guys, one of the early scholars of Islam, how many of you heard of Imam Zuhri? Imam Zuhri. Imam Zuhri, he's a scholar who is considered an authority in recording the hadiths. He started his training in the field of hadith. And guess who his teacher was? His teacher was one of the students of Aisha radiallahu anha, and it was a woman. In fact, they told him, if you are seeking knowledge, I recommend that you go and learn from Amra, because Amra is a treasure trove of knowledge. Go and learn from her, because she was taught by Aisha. She was one of Aisha's best students. So how many of you knew that Imam Zuhri, he learned from a female? And that's for all you brothers out there who want to say it's haram for a woman to teach on the internet. I get all these puck shots. That's why I had to take a break from here. I get puck shots from men all the time telling me that I'm going to hell. A woman shouldn't be on the internet teaching. Well, did you know that Imam Zuhri, his teacher was a female? She was the student of Aisha radiallahu anha. Listen to what Imam Zuhri says. He says, when I went to Amra, I saw that she was a boundless sea in regards to knowledge and understanding of this deen. She was the best teacher he said he ever had. She made things clear, broke things down to him. Subhanallah. And this was one of the first scholars of Islam. Aisha, radiallahu anha, she raised more than 200 scholars, such as Amra. Amra was just one of over 200 scholars that she trained. Another one of her students was the daughter of Talha. And listen to what the daughter of Talha said. She said many people would come to see Aisha from around the world. And she said, and because of my closeness to Aisha, the older people would treat me with respect, and the younger ones would look at me as a big sister. And when they went back to their countries, they used to send letters and presents to Aisha. And I would show the letters I received from them to Aisha. And I would say, Auntie, this is the letter and present that so-and-so sent you. And Aisha would say, oh, my daughter, answer that person and respond to their present. How many of you knew this? After the Prophet Muhammad died, Islam spread throughout Persia. Islam spread throughout the Roman Empire. People would come from all over the world to learn from Aisha, radiallahu anha. There were also many close relatives of Aisha whom she trained. How many of you knew that her sister Kulthum, she was her teacher? How many of you knew that she was the teacher of Hafsa? Y'all know who Hafsa was? Hafsa was the wife of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hafsa was one of the Prophet's wives, but even she learned a lot from Aisha. Also the daughters of Abdul Rahman. Okay. So a lot of people learn from Aisha, guys. She was a scholar. And in addition to these private training circles she established, she would also go and make Hajj every year. And whenever Aisha made Hajj, she would set up a tent. And she would sit there and answer people's questions about Islam. The Hajis would come to her and they would sit outside her tent and ask her questions about Islam. And she would reply to the questions they asked. And also people would send her letters from around the world, from Egypt and all the other places where Islam went, asking her questions, and she would respond. So as you guys can see, Aisha fulfilled the duty of communicating Islam to the highest degree. She followed the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she carried past that knowledge that he gave to her on to everyone. In fact, we can say that without Aisha, there would be no way that we would understand women's issues or family relations. Also, let me tell you why she was able to correct Ibn Masud. Aisha used to scrutinize the hadith that were submitted to her. She would also scrutinize whatever she heard the other companions say. She would look to see, who did you hear it from? She would look at their reasoning. She would look at the language. Remember, I tell y'all, language is important. Be careful how you word things. Aisha would tell the other companions. She'd tell Ibn Masud. She'd tell Ibn Umar. She would tell Ibn Abbas, all the other companions. She'd say, be careful how you word things. And she emphasized, like I do, the history. She would tell them, don't just tell people something without giving the history. The history of as to why the prophet said this. What happened to make him say this? She was a stickler on that. That's why I am. I get angry when I hear these brothers quote hadiths to you guys and they don't tell you the story. What's the story behind the prophet saying that if there was anyone to prostrate to, it would have been your husband? You using that out of context. Tell the people what happened to make him say that. What happened to make him say that? That's how Aisha was. And I imitate her. She was my role model. I had to learn her. I had to become her when I was a child. Okay, that's what we did back when I was growing up in the 60s. We adopted a companion and made that companion our role model. So I do the same thing when I teach. I'm always giving y'all the history, to the point that other people accuse me of making up hadiths. I don't make up hadiths. All the hadiths I quote, the majority of them are from Sahih Bukhari, but I'm doing what you don't do. I'm giving the history too. And I'm giving the experience. Because this is what Aisha demanded. That's what the Prophet ﷺ demanded. So Aisha would listen to what the other companions had to say, their reasoning, their language, the history, and then she would give her opinion as to whether or not what they were saying was correct, or she would critique them. She had one objective, and that was to convey the religion taught by the Prophet to the future generations. Remember, she lived with the Prophet ﷺ. She said the biggest anxiety, our Prophet suffered with anxiety. The worst anxiety he had, she said, was he used to worry about the future Muslims. He used to worry what's going to happen to the future generations. So Aisha was a stickler on language and history. She would tell the other companions, give the people the reasoning, give the people the history, make the words plain. Because that's what the Prophet wanted. He wanted this religion to be easy even for the future generations. You brothers need to learn from her today. Y'all need to stop quoting hadiths without knowing the history. If you're going to give a hadith to these people, tell them what happened to make the Prophet say it. I've only heard one brother do that. Well, two. Two brothers I know do that. One being Yasir Qadi. And I know Yasir Qadi, may Allah make him right. There's some issues. But Yasir Qadi is one of the brothers I've ever heard that gave the story, the history behind the hadith. That's why I find it so bewildering. This Sufi stuff, when he was upon Sirat al-Mustaqim, he's a graduate, of the University of Medina. He's one of the few brothers I've ever heard give you the true story behind a hadith. And then there's one other. Let me give you an example of how Aisha was honored and how she was held in high esteem by the men of her time. One day when Amir ibn Umayyah was in the marketplace bargaining for a shawl, Umar showed up, and Umar was the caliph then. Umar asked him, he said, "What you doing, Amir?" Amir said, "I'm getting ready to buy a shawl and I'm going to give it away as a form of charity." And Umar said, "Okay, go ahead." Then after a while, he came and saw Amir again and said, "Amir, where's the shawl you bought?" Amir said, "I gave it away as charity." And Umar asked him, "Who did you give it to?" He said, "I gave it to one of my wives." Umar looked at Amir He said, what do you mean you gave it to one of your wives? You said you were going to give it as charity. Amir said, yes. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, he said, whatever you give to your wives is a charity for you. Umar got angry. He said, oh, Amir, don't you dare lie on the behalf of the Prophet. Amir got scared. He said, oh, Amir, oh, Umar, I'm not lying. He said, by Allah, let's go to Aisha. Aisha tell you. Aisha knows. So they went to visit Aisha. And Amir asked her, he said, oh, Aisha, would you swear in the name of Allah? Did you hear the Prophet say that whatever you give to your wives is a charity for you? Aisha said, yes, this is true. And then Umar said, well, where was I when the Prophet said that? He said, I was probably doing some chores or something. So that shows Umar believed Aisha. Umar believed Aisha. He knew that Aisha would never lie. Aisha said, yes, Amir is speaking the truth. The Prophet did say whatever a man gives to his wife is a form of charity for him. So that shows how respected she was. Umar radiallahu anhu. Remember, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said if there were to ever be a prophet after him, it would have been Umar. If Umar held Aisha in such respect and form, why is it that men today don't? And why is it that men today don't hold any women of knowledge in respect and form? So again, the point here is that Aisha was viewed as an expert and an arbiter amongst the companions. Whenever they had scholarly disagreements on issues such as the reporting of the hadith, they would go to her. So that shows that in her era, women weren't treated like dogs. The Prophet fulfilled his mission. We talked about today in our Aqidah class how Allah says, oh, Muhammad, you are sent as a mercy to the world. So you can see that he fulfilled that mercy. He brought about the rights of women. He raised women up to the level of scholars and arbiters. So there's no need for you women of 2023 to try to put on some pants and go out and be a man and imitate the kafir where women's live. Instead, I say go home, learn your deen, and make the men respect you. Respect is earned, not given. Okay? Not only was Aisha a scholar of hadith, guys, but she also knew the fiqh of things. She was a fiqh master too. She used to intervene in the accounts related by Umar, Ibn Umar, Abu Huraira, Ibn Abbas, Uthman, Ali, and others. Again, whenever they would narrate something, they would come to her. They would come to her, and she would either correct their accounts, either partially or in its entirety, and they accepted it. We got men today who ask for corrections, but if a woman corrects you, you don't want to accept it, but you'll accept it from a 30-year-old punk boy. That's what kills me. A woman of age, a 60-something-year-old woman try to correct you. You won't accept it, but a 35-year-old punk from out of the rocks desert can come to you and tell you he's a sheikh when he ain't even lived long enough to know how to spell the word sheikh. You'll accept correction from him, but not from a 60-some-year-old woman who studied these hadiths intensely from A to Z, who had real teachers of hadith, that you know of. You won't accept her correction, but you'll accept a 30-year-old boy's corrections. The companions weren't like that. They accepted the corrections of Aisha, either partially or entirely. She had an outstanding knowledge not only in hadith and the sunnah, but also in tafsir. Did y'all know that? Tafsir, fiqh, history, genealogy, poetry, literature, and medicine. Remember, Aisha was not just a person of the hadith. She was a nurse too. She was a nurse too. In fact, Aisha was her own school. Listen to what Abu Musa al-Ash'ari said. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, who was one of the original companions, he said whenever the companions of the Prophet faced a hardship, they would refer it to Aisha, and by all means, she would have some knowledge about that matter. And they listened to her. Listen to what Urwa ibn Zubair says. He says he has never seen anyone so knowledgeable of the religion in regards to what's lawful, what's unlawful, poetry, medicine, history, or genealogy as much as Aisha. Listen to what Atta ibn Abu Rabah says. He says amongst all the people, Aisha had the most knowledge and comprehension in regards to fiqh regulations. You brothers want to take fatwas off the internet over what Aisha said. Aisha said a woman can show her face. A woman can show her hands. Aisha said we women never wore black. We never wore dark colors unless we were mourning the death of someone. Aisha said Allah loves beauty. You brothers want to disregard her, this scholar of fiqh, you want to disregard her and take fatwas off an Islam Q&A 2023 website. Shame on you men. Shame on you brothers. Finally, listen to what Imam Zuhri said. He said, if the knowledge of all the other wives of the Prophet were to be added up with the knowledge of all other women and then compared to the knowledge of Aisha, radiallahu anha, her knowledge would surpass all of them. This nation has not witnessed any other woman who even came close to her in her knowledge. Allah's messenger didn't love any of his wives as he loved her. And many of her attributes have already been related by Allah in the Quran and in the Sunnah. Subhanallah, guys. Subhanallah. So I say again, there's a lot of Muslims out there. We're living in the days of fitan, the days in which women are treated like dirt. The days when women don't have any self-love, any self-esteem. Y'all need to get with it, women. Change begins with yourself. Allah says he will never change the condition of a people until they change the condition of themselves. You sisters want respect from men? You sister want men to honor you? You make them do it. You make them. And the way you make them is not by imitating these Kafir women, holding up women lib flags. You're already liberated. You just got to, first of all, learn the deen correctly. Learn the deen correctly. And then whatever you learn, you hold firm to it. Allah says in the Quran, hold on to the rope of Islam altogether. Well, you let them brothers know I'm part of that rope too. We're women, but we're part of that rope too. And we hold on all together. You can only oppress me if I allow you. I'm not going to allow you to oppress me. I know my rights. I know what I can and can't wear. I know what I can and can't do. You respect what Allah said I can and can't do. Otherwise, bounce. It's just that simple. Bounce. When you sisters lay down the cards that way, those brothers will stop all that ignorance. They'll stop all that oppression against you. Aisha made them respect her. She had to go out and lead an army of over 300,000 men on the battlefield. She earned the respect she had. She let the people know, the men and women know, that she wasn't nobody to be played with. I know my deen. You lost your religion, you go look for it. That was her motto. I know my rights. I know what I can and can't do. You don't like it, take it up to Allah with the law. Go to the prayer rug with it. Don't come in my face with it. That's how she was. That's how you women need to be. And Aisha didn't imitate Kafir women. She didn't like Kafir women. She didn't associate with them. Anybody that tried to imitate them, she wouldn't even allow them in her house. When the Roman women came to learn from her, it was a group of them, about 40 or 50 of them. They all came from Syria to learn from her. They were dressed in see-through clothing. She told them, I'm not letting you in my house. She said, no believing woman is coming in my house dressed in see-through clothing. She said, y'all go back and put on some right clothes and look like Muslim women, or you ain't coming in here. She said, we ain't no Kafirs in here. That's the attitude Aisha had. That's the attitude that you Muslim women today need to adopt. Be unique, be distinct, based on the principles that Allah has given us. Not trying to be like these American Kafir women. All right, I'm going to stop right here. And again, I apologize for the